I tracked down 15 films from the 1980s that almost nobody talks about anymore, and I'm not talking about obscure foreign art house stuff. These are American movies with stars like Al Pacino, Rob Lowe, and even Keanu Reeves. Some of these vanished for a reason, some actually deserve another look, and at least one of them nearly destroyed a Hollywood studio. Let's get into it. The Heavenly Kid is one of those 1980s films that could only come out in that decade. A light, supernatural teen comedy with a little bit of Happy Days nostalgia thrown in. The movie starts in the late 60s. Bobby, a leather-jacketed greaser, dies in a drag race chicken stunt. Stuck in the afterlife, he's told he can finally get to heaven if he helps out a troubled teenager back on Earth. Cut to the 1980s, and Bobby's mission is to mentor Lenny, a nerdy high school kid who just happens to be Bobby's own son. Bobby, disguised as a snarky guardian, gives Lenny a makeover and doles out questionable advice. The film climaxes with Bobby facing a choice: save his son or disappear forever. Critics did not buy it. The Heavenly Kid got roasted for being a cheap knockoff of everything from Back to the Future to Grease. Gene Siskel just called it teenage summer film trash. Still, if you can get past the eye-rolling, there's a kind of goofy sweetness to it. As a time capsule, it's pure mid-80s comfort food. Derivative, sure, but harmless and sort of endearing. Square Dance is one of those films you just couldn't make now. The plot would get it canceled before it even hit streaming. Winona Ryder plays Gemma, a 13-year-old from rural Texas raised by her grandfather, played by Jason Robards. Her estranged mother suddenly invites her to visit the city. And there she meets Rory, Rob Lowe, at the time known for Brat Pack movies, who plays a 21-year-old man with an intellectual disability. The two of them form a bond that's innocent but complicated. They imagine themselves as a married couple. They go to a square dance together, and the adults around them start to worry. This is a modest, sincere coming-of-age story with some really solid acting. Rob Lowe actually got a lot of praise for this role, and a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actor, which is still the only major acting nomination of his career. It nearly never happened. The funding collapsed until Michael Nesmith from the Monkees came in with $2.5 million, and NBC pitched in another $1.5 million to secure the TV rights. Originally, Emilio Estevez was set to play Rory, but when he left to make Wisdom, he passed the script to Rob Lowe, who took the part for 1/20th of his usual fee. Lowe took the research seriously, even spent some time in special needs classrooms. Wisdom is a romantic crime drama. Estevez wrote, directed, and starred in it, and his fiancée at the time, Demi Moore, co-stars. He plays John Wisdom, a college graduate who becomes a Robin Hood-style bank robber, not stealing cash but wiping out loan records for farmers. He and Moore's character turn into folk heroes as they run across the country until it all comes down in a final twist ending that just kills the whole movie. That's how bad it is. The movie started with Estevez just coming up with the title and writing the script in a 3-week blitz. At only 23, he directed it under the mentorship of Robert Wise, a Hollywood legend. But critics hated it. Leonard Maltin called it wretchedly scripted, with one of the most self-defeating wrap-ups you'll ever see. Gene Siskel said it's a dim-witted remake of Bonnie and Clyde. Estevez later admitted the critical pummeling hit him hard. It was not a great film, but it was a good film, he said. Still proud, but honest about what happened. Moore, who was there from the start, she read every draft, later said the movie wasn't the most positive professional move for her, but she thought Estevez did a good job for a first-time director. Their relationship didn't last much longer after the film. Earth passes through a comet's tail, and almost everybody turns into red dust. Seriously, the only survivors are people who spent the night behind metal. Total B-movie logic, and the film just rolls with it. You get two Valley Girl sisters waking up to a completely empty Los Angeles. At first, it's just them and a city that feels abandoned, but then they start running into zombie-like mutants, and for good measure, some shady government scientists. There are machine guns, plenty of sass, and some classic mall raiding. One of the film's most famous scenes has them dancing through a deserted department store to Cyndi Lauper's Girls Just Want to Have Fun. Night of the Comet isn't afraid to go full tongue-in-cheek. It's Valley Girl meets Dawn of the Dead, and somehow it works. The absurd premise just becomes part of the fun, and the heroines treat the apocalypse like it's another day at the mall. This is a good-natured, end-of-the-world B-movie, and the way the humor supports the melodrama just makes it easy to watch. Over time, it even inspired other creators. Buffy Summers, for example, took some inspiration from one of the characters here. Al Pacino, right in the middle of a career slump, stars here as a New York playwright whose life falls apart just as his Broadway show goes into crisis. His wife bails, leaves him with 5 kids, and he has to figure out parenting and playwriting at the same time. The plot's mostly about him trying to keep the family together, dealing with showbiz chaos, and trying to convince a Hollywood star to save his play. The movie tries to balance domestic comedy and theater satire, and the ending here is supposed to be about how family love trumps career success. But it did not work. Critics just found the whole thing annoying, especially the over-precocious kids. Newsweek called it sad, a movie trying to be adorable and failing. Roger Ebert gave it 2 out of 4, and famously asked, "What's Pacino doing in this mess? What's happening to his career?" Pacino actually took the job because he wanted to do a movie about a guy with his kids dealing with New York and show business. But the production turned sour. Pacino and director Arthur Hiller clashed constantly. Pacino later put it as nicely as he could, "Sometimes people who are not really meant to be together get together in this business. It's very unfortunate for all parties concerned." The Night Before goes into much darker territory, with Keanu Reeves in the lead. He plays Winston, a high school nerd who blacks out on prom night and wakes up in a Los Angeles alley with zero memory of what happened. His date is missing, and as it turns out, Winston accidentally sold her to a pimp while drugged. What follows is a wild all-night run through LA's roughest neighborhoods as Winston tries to retrace his steps, dodge gangsters, and rescue his date. This movie has not aged well. There's just too many over-the-top racial stereotypes, with basically every non-white character presented as a criminal or a joke. There's a scene where Keanu tries out black slang with a streetwise character. It was embarrassing then, and it's painful now. One review even called it a 90-minute racist dumpster fire and said only Keanu's charm keeps it from being unwatchable. Even Keanu himself, who had a promising year career-wise, later admitted the movie was a misfire. It nearly derailed everything for him. North Shore is pure 1980s surf movie. It takes that familiar Karate Kid formula and just drops it onto the beaches of Oahu. Matt Adler stars as Rick Kane, a teenager from Arizona who thinks he's figured out surfing in a wave pool until he tries the real thing in Hawaii and gets a wake-up call. He picks up some humility, new skills, and starts to understand what surfing really means. Eventually, he goes up against the arrogant pro, played by Laird Hamilton, a real-life surf legend, in the big competition. It's a coming-of-age journey, loaded with Hawaii's natural beauty, a dose of romance, and a genuine look at surf culture in the 80s. At the box office, it was a wipeout, less than $4 million. Critics at the time wrote it off as a predictable Karate Kid copycat, but praised the surfing scenes. But the story didn't end there. Over the years, North Shore became a cult surf classic. Real surfing champs show up in the cast, and big wave legend Jerry Lopez is the wise local shaper who delivers the soul surfing advice. It's not high art, but North Shore nails the feeling of a specific place and time. Lady in White is all about atmosphere. Set in a small town in 1962, it's got that perfect Halloween ghost story feeling. Frankie is a 9-year-old who, after getting locked in his school's cloakroom as a prank, witnesses the ghost of a little girl. What he sees is the murder reenacted right in front of him. Instead of backing off, Frankie starts digging into the mystery. He finds out about the Lady in White, the grieving mother's ghost, and eventually uncovers the truth about a long unsolved child murder. That real-life murderer is still somewhere in town. It's an old-fashioned ghost yarn, but what sets it apart is how well the film uses mood and family dynamics. Even Roger Ebert singled out the insidious atmosphere of the film, saying it's less about plot and more about the mood that takes over. Just proves you don't need big stars or special effects when you have a good story. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 67%. Pretty good, all things considered. It stands out as one of those rare PG-13 horror films that's creepy but still gentle. And a lot of people come back to it for that exact reason. Vibes is a strange one, a supernatural comedy adventure with Cyndi Lauper and Jeff Goldblum as psychic misfits. Lauper plays a New York hairdresser who can talk to spirits. Goldblum is a museum guy who reads the past of objects by touch. Peter Falk recruits them for a treasure hunt in Ecuador, supposedly to find a lost Incan city filled with psychic energy. The whole thing turns into a jungle road trip, Goldblum and Lauper bickering, dodging rival treasure hunters, and trying to stay one step ahead of Falk's double crosses. It's a mix of comedy, adventure, and romance, on paper at least. In reality, it can't decide what it wants to be. Critics called it a tonal mess, the jokes didn't land, and audiences just stayed away. It made less than $2 million on an $18 million budget. Columbia Pictures tried to hype it up as Lauper's film debut, but it didn't do her any favors. She even won a Razzie for Worst Actress. It never got any real reappraisal. For most people, it's just another weird late 80s curiosity where Goldblum and Lauper hunt psychic treasure in the Andes. The Big Picture is a Hollywood satire with plenty of bite, directed by Christopher Guest of Spinal Tap fame. It was actually his debut behind the camera. Kevin Bacon plays Nick Chapman, a film school hotshot who gets the next big thing treatment after winning a student film award. Hollywood welcomes him with open arms, but Nick's dream project quickly goes sideways. Nick loses his way, gets the fancy lifestyle, loses old friends, until the inevitable crash. The new studio boss cancels his film, and Nick ends up doing odd jobs to pay the bills. The Big Picture goes after every Hollywood cliché, greedy execs, clueless agents, fake friends, and finds plenty to skewer. Martin Short almost steals the whole movie as Nick's way too eager agent. There are in-jokes everywhere for movie fans, and even cameos from Elliot Gould and John Cleese. Despite good reviews, The Big Picture was basically dumped in theaters, made barely $117,000 at the box office. Studio politics played a part. Columbia Pictures had new management, and they shelved several projects from the old regime, including this one. It's a shame, though, because this is the definitive and most incisive satire of modern indie Hollywood. Odd Jobs is pure mid-80s cable comedy. 5 college guys set up a moving business for the summer and end up in a turf war with the mob. The leads are Paul Reiser and Robert Townsend, both still years away from being household names. Their company, Affordable Moving, ends up butting heads with a rival crew that's actually a front for organized crime. From there, it's just mayhem. Car chases in moving vans, mob boss mix-ups, and slapstick showdowns where couches and refrigerators turn into a weapon. The movie doesn't even try to hide what it is. Lots of yelling, pratfalls, and the kind of juvenile jokes that filled up the HBO schedule back then. Critics pretty much hated it. It barely got a theatrical release, then landed straight on to late-night cable. Basically, Odd Jobs is mostly just a forgotten entry in the parade of 80s comedies that tried and failed to cash in on the Animal House formula. The Legend of Billie Jean is a wild mix of outlaw adventure and pop culture anthem built around another strong Helen Slater performance. She'd just played Supergirl, and now she's Billie Jean Davy, a Texas teen who finds herself at the center of a media storm. It all starts with a busted scooter. Billie Jean wants the local rich kid who trashed her brother's ride to pay up. Fair is fair, but instead, things get out of hand. There's a confrontation, an assault, and Billie Jean's brother, Christian Slater in his first film role, shoots someone in self-defense. Suddenly the two of them, and their friends, are on the run. Billie Jean becomes a symbol of teenage rebellion as she tries to get justice and enough cash to fix the scooter. On release, the movie bombed, but Helen Slater deserves all the credit for making Billie Jean earnest and believable. Years later, though, The Legend of Billie Jean picked up a serious cult following. The theme song, Invincible by Pat Benatar, became a hit on its own. Benatar herself was not a fan. She'd introduced the song at concerts by saying, "This is from the worst movie ever made." Her attitude probably didn't help the movie's reputation at the time. Miracle Mile stands out as one of those rare movies that actually manages to mix a genuine love story with end-of-the-world panic, all in real time. It follows Harry, played by Anthony Edwards, who picks up a payphone outside a diner at 4 a.m. and hears something no one ever expects, a warning that nuclear missiles are on the way. Suddenly, he has about an hour left, and so does everyone in Los Angeles. But the real kicker is that Harry just met Julie. So now, instead of worrying about saving himself, he's dead set on finding her and not dying alone. From there, the film just goes. Harry tries to wrangle a helicopter evacuation, riot spreads through the city, things turn ugly fast. The whole thing builds toward an ending that, honestly, you just don't see in studio movies from the 80s. I won't spoil it here, of course, it deserves to be seen. The studio didn't know what to do with it. Miracle Mile got a tiny release, barely anyone saw it in theaters, and it slipped almost straight to VHS. It grossed just over $1 million, which, by Hollywood standards, is a flop. But over time, it built a following. People really responded to the gutsy, uncompromising way the film ends. Even Cloverfield, that 2008 monster movie, mirrors some of its story beats. Solar Babies is the kind of movie you almost have to see to believe. Set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where water is currency, a group of orphaned kids, the Solar Babies, fight back against an evil water-hoarding regime. They do so by playing lacrosse on roller skates for some reason. And if that's not enough, they also find a glowing alien orb that can maybe bring rain back to Earth. So, the kids escape their orphanage, dodge bounty hunters, get chased by solar-powered death rays, and try to save the world with this weird alien soccer ball. It was a disaster at the box office. $23 million spent, $1.6 million earned. For comparison, Aliens cost less and looked about 1,000 times better. Critics hammered it for being nonsensical and cheap. It holds a perfect 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. And the story behind the scenes is even wilder than the movie. Mel Brooks produced it. Years after Blazing Saddles, he wanted to try something serious, but Solar Babies spiraled out of control. The budget exploded from $5 million to $23 million. Brooks nearly lost everything. He mortgaged his house, his cars, everything just to keep the film going. He called it, "Half of it is like pretty damn good, and half of it is the worst movie I've ever seen in my whole life." The Ice Pirates takes place in a galaxy where water is more valuable than gold, and pirates literally steal ice from the bad guys. Robert Urich plays Jason, the lead pirate who ends up rescuing a princess. He gets tangled in a quest for a mythical water planet and runs from the evil Templars. The whole thing is intentionally goofy. Sword fights and chainsaws in space, a time warp that ages everyone decades in seconds, and even a chestburster parody with something called space herpes. None of this is meant to be taken seriously. It's Mad Max mixed with Star Wars, if both were made on a shoestring budget. The costumes are wild, the jokes are constant, and the whole thing has a sort of cheap energy you don't really see anymore. Most critics were not amused. The New York Times called it a Star Wars spin-off made in an underdeveloped galaxy, a mess that tries too hard to be funny. The movie has a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes, but at least the cast had a blast making it. Angelica Houston played a pirate, Ron Perlman was one of the crew, and everybody seems to remember the mess behind the scenes more than the movie.